It was always the Jags.
It's always the Jags.
It's always the Jags.
Always the Jags.
Welcome into Always the Jags. This is your number one podcast, number one to hop on to talk about all things Jacksonville Jaguars, all things NFL, all things fantasy football. Man, the season is right around the corner. I don't know about you, but I'm hyped. I'm going to start trying to do this show every Thursday at 9 o'clock, at 9 a.m. To help, to kind of get that consistency going. So I know this one's not really done at that time. But next week, before we play the Dolphins, we'll be starting the show at Thursdays every 9 o'clock. Every Thursday at 9 o'clock. Oh my gosh. So today we're going to take a look at just a couple of things before the season starts. I'm going to do an episode on my predictions for the entire NFL schedule. Because there's this really cool schedule predictor online where you can kind of predict every single game in the NFL. And like a lot of people like to do their Jaguars schedule predictions and or their team predictions, and they'll just throw out a number. I like to actually look at each team that each schedule that each team is going to have, because a team might look like, an 11-6 team or a 10-7 team. Their schedule might actually be super difficult. Or a team might look like a 12-5 team or a 13-4 team, and that's because their schedule is super easy. So we're going to take a look at it. So today I'm going to do my NFL predictions, and then I'm going to do my predictions for the Jacksonville Jaguars, what record I think they're going to have. So these are my official predictions for the 2024 NFL season for each team. So first, for the AFC, number one seed in the AFC, I have the Chiefs. Last year, the year they traded away Tyreek Hill, I thought that they weren't even going to make the playoffs. And then all they did was win the Super Bowl. And then they did it again. So it's like at this point, if you think the Chiefs are anything other than the top team in the league, I don't know what to tell you. They're going to go 12-5. They're going to lose some games, have them losing to some divisional games. They'll probably lose to the Broncos or the Raiders or the Chargers once or twice. But overall, it's going to be a very strong season for the Chiefs. They're going to go 12-5 and be the number one seed in the AFC again. Now I have the Ravens at 12-5 as the number two seed in the AFC. There's a good chance that if the Ravens beat the Chiefs on Thursday night, then obviously this flops. Right now, I think I have the Chiefs winning. Obviously, this will flop, and the Ravens will be 13-4, and then the Chiefs will be 11-6. Chiefs are still going to win their division, but if the Ravens are able to beat the Chiefs and still end up with the 12-5 record, which is what I have for them, then they'll become the number one seed in the AFC. So right now, I think it's a two-team race between the Chiefs and the Ravens. I think the Bengals are right there too, but just based upon the way the schedule plays out, the Ravens end up having, even at 12-5, because I have the Bengals and the Ravens at 12-5, but the Ravens still come out as a better seed just because of the way their schedule plays out. So it's tight in the AFC North. Number three seed, I have the Dolphins at 12-5. A lot of people think this is too high, that the Dolphins aren't going to do that well. But again, this is one of those teams that has a supremely easy schedule. Let's look at the playoff teams they got to face. Dolphins face the 49ers, the Texans, the Browns, Bills twice, and those are the only playoff teams that they face all year. They face the Patriots twice. They got the Jets twice. They've got the Cardinals. They've got the Titans, the Colts, the Raiders. The Dolphins, they kind of have a cakewalk of a schedule. I think it's one of the easiest schedules in the NFL, just looking at it and based upon where teams have been. So I could easily see the Dolphins going 12-5, and I think they end up winning their division. So next, for the number four seed, that's where I have our Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'll go a little more into depth on my other episode about which games I think the Jaguars are going to win and which ones I think they're going to lose. But for right now, I have the Jaguars going 11-6. That feels about right because there's a couple of really tough games that could really go either way on our schedule. I could also see the Texans going 11-6, and if they do that, we wouldn't win our division, but we would still make it as a wild card because there's a couple of games for the Texans. Their schedule is a lot harder than our schedule is. Like, that's what happens when I think it's one of those things too, people forget. It's like, we did have a first place schedule last year. So the teams that we were going against, the level of competition was heavily raised. That's why you go from worst to first, because when you're a first place team, you play the other first place teams in the division. We went from being the worst team in the division to playing the other best teams in the division, and we still ended up with the same record, 9-8. It just wasn't enough to get into the playoffs this time. So again, they said the Jaguars season ending the way it did made me so upset I couldn't even finish recording my podcast. This year I didn't really cover free agency or anything like that because I was very upset. I thought we should have made it. But anyway, this year we do. I'm saying we go 11-6. I think we did get better in the offseason, even though some people feel like the Jaguars just kind of swapped out players. I think overall we did get better. So number 5 seed is going to be the Bengals at 12-5. The Bengals could almost easily be 13-4, but I really feel like 12-5 is where they're going to kind of hit because, again, those divisional games, I think there's at least 3 losses for the Bengals in their division because the Steelers, the Browns, and the Ravens play them so tough. And the Browns have repeatedly swept the Bengals, if I'm not mistaken. For some reason, the Browns just know how to beat the Bengals. So we'll see exactly what happens next year, but I have the Bengals at the number 5 seed, 12-5. Number 6 seed, I have the Jets at 11-6. I think with Aaron Rodgers coming, that obviously greatly increases, their chances of winning and the games that they're going to win next year. And remember, they beat the Bills with Josh Allen without Aaron Rodgers last year. So, with him, a capable quarterback, because again, we're not just going from Zach Wilson, who was a bad quarterback and literally would lose you games. We're going up to one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So it's not just like if the Jets just had a functional quarterback, they could do middle of the pack. But now they're going to have one of the best ones in the NFL. And again, the only reason why this record isn't harder is because why this record isn't higher is because the Jets also have a very tough schedule. Somehow, the way the cookie crumbled, the Jets got a tough schedule. And I think it's partly from facing the Bills twice and facing the Dolphins twice. It kind of makes a difference. So I have the Jets making the playoffs at the 6th seed. The number 7th seed spot is going to be a hotly contested contest between the Texans and the Bills. I have them both going 10-7. Right now, it's the Texans at that number 7 seed going 10-7 because I believe the Texans are going to beat the Bills in the regular season, which is what puts them above them for that number 7 spot. Now, again, if the Jaguars go 11-6, and if the Texans go 11-6 and win another game, they'll win the division, and then it'll be the Jaguars in that number 7 slot. But either way, I still think that we're going to be able to beat the Browns and the Bills, who are both nipping on our heels. And I think we will still end up with in that case, we would end up with the 7th seed. And if we beat the Jets, we'd end up with the 6th seed. But either way, there's a huge range of consequences here. So my official record prediction for the Texans is 10-7 because, again, they have a crazy hard schedule. They play the Chiefs. We play the Jaguars play the Raiders. The Texans play the Ravens. Jaguars play the Browns. See what I mean? So it's that first schedule difference that can be, we have 2 games that we could win. Do you see the Texans beating the Chiefs and the Ravens right now? They're close, but there's the Raiders and the Browns. So that's why I have the Texans at 7th seed going 10-7. Still making the playoffs, though. Still, Texans will be very dangerous if they get into the playoffs. So number 8, I have the Bills going 10-7, and they end up missing the playoffs. It's crazy because there's going to be 3 teams in the AFC that miss the playoffs with a winning record, and I think that's just a sign of how stacked the AFC is compared to the NFC. And it's just based upon the fact that it's going to be a slugfest in this division this year. I don't necessarily think that the Bills aren't good enough to make the playoffs. But when you lose your top 2 receivers, you're kind of throwing everything on a rookie and a bunch of kind of hodgepodge of guys. And Josh Allen is a great quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but you can only do so much. You know what I mean? You got to have other things around you. Matt Milano just got hurt, which is a terrible news for Bills Mafia. So I don't think it's going to be a bad season. I mean, anybody that has a season where they go 10-7 should be happy. It's just the way it crumbles where they end up missing the playoffs. Now, if the Bills beat the Texans, I will be very happy, and they will, obviously make the playoffs as that 7th seed. But I just think the Texans are stronger right now, and so that's kind of where the Bills end up missing out in the playoffs at 10-7. The number 9 seed, we have the Browns at 9-8. That's my prediction for them. I think again, it's a winning season. It's just with the Browns, it's all kind of about Deshaun Watson. Like, how is he going to play? What kind of quarterback is he going to be? No one really knows because he's been so off for so long, and all the controversy surrounding him. So the Browns, I think, are going to have the weirdest season. They're going to beat some really good teams and then lose to some other teams. So I feel like this is right in the range of possibilities for 9-8. That defense is incredible, and I think it's going to continue being incredible. But at the same time, it does kind of feel very top heavy, and their offensive line has had a lot of injuries, a lot of really bad injuries. Like they're the kind of team that needs to make a move, but they also don't have any cap space to make a move. So they kind of got to give up somebody if they want to fix their offensive line. So if the reason the Browns don't make the playoffs, my prediction is the reason why the Browns will not end up making the playoffs this year is solely that the offensive line, because it's hurt, it's banged up, and it's not doing so well. At least that's all the reports that I've been hearing. So my official prediction for the Browns is 9-8. For the Steelers, I have them also going 9-8. I really don't want to bet against. I feel like my gut says the Steelers are going to go 8-9. Like, Russell Wilson doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. I think Justin Fields is a better quarterback, honestly. I think maybe if the Steelers had traded for Brandon Ayuk, I'd feel much better about the 9-8. But you look at their receiver core, they got rid of Deontay Johnson, and it's just George Pickens. I'm sure like another guy will come up because the Steelers are always good at picking receivers and then watching them just, go insane. Like, Steelers have like some of the best history of drafting receivers. Just Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Chase Claypool. While he was with the Steelers, he was good. So I don't think they're really worried about their receiver room and everything else on their team. It's Mike Tomlin team. It's going to be very solid. I just couldn't pick them to go 8-9 because of Mike Tomlin. I think there's one more win they're going to eke out. Just like but they will not make the playoffs this year. They're going to be the 10th seed at 9-8, winning record, but no playoff berth. So next on our 11th seed, we have the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans, I have going 7-10. Because it's like on paper, the Tennessee Titans fixed everything that they needed to. They added another top flight receiver to complement DeAndre Hopkins. They completely revamped their secondary, which was their weakness for a long time because they always had a strong defensive line, but you could always throw on them because they had no cornerbacks. And now they brought in Snead and Chidobe Awuzie. So on paper, the Titans look really ferocious. They look like they could do a whole lot. It just kind of all rests on the shoulders of the, again, offensive line and Will Levis. Because in this league right now, I think there is a dearth of offensive line players and offensive line play. And a lot of teams, like, they're able to fix up their skill positions, but that O-line is really hard to get right. And right now, I think the Titans, their O-line is very shaky. I think it's good in the run game. Missing Derrick Henry is also going to make a big difference. I mean, Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard will make an effective duo, but missing Derrick Henry, it's going to be a lot more on the offensive line to clear those holes, to blow up those lanes, because you're not going to have Derrick Henry bulldozing guys. So that's why I have them at 7-10. I think it's a growth season for Will Levis. I don't know if the Titans feel like that'll be enough from Will Levis to really cement him as their future. It's kind of up to them, but right now I have the Titans going 7-10. Number 12 seed, I have the Colts doing the same thing, going 7-10. Again, in both cases, it's an improvement of last season. So I think both teams are going to get better. But it's just remember, both these teams play the Jaguars and the Texans twice this year. They're both going to play the Bills. They're both going to play the Browns. They've got a pretty hefty schedule to have to get through. So I think that's something that we'll have to remember. And I think the Titans, because the Bengals finish as a 3rd seed, I think either the Titans or the Colts play them. And that's going to be even more difficult because now the Bengals are healthy. So with the Colts, I have them at the number 12 seed at 7-10. I think it's going to be a growth year for Anthony Richardson. Whether the Colts decide to keep growing with him, I think they will, just by virtue of being a first-round pick and seeing improvement. It's kind of the difference because, for Will Levis, he's got to really show a lot in order for the Titans to continue with him because he was only a second-round pick. But for Anthony Richardson, as long as he shows improvement and growth, the Colts are going to stick with him because they invested a number 4 overall pick in him. And I think there will be a lot of growth. I mean, the Colts didn't add much this offseason to their team. They just kind of stuck with keeping their own guys. They had a strong draft. So, I mean, if the rookies come on really strong, maybe they'll end up at 8 and 9 or possibly even 9 or 8. But I don't see it going much higher than that. I think the Colts will end up at 7 and 10. Number 13, I have the Chargers going 6 and 11. I remember when I posted this to my friends, a lot of people were surprised at how I have the Chargers at 6 and 11, and how low I had the Chargers for most of this year. And I was surprised at how high people have the Chargers, because like I know Jim Harbaugh is a fantastic NFL coach. Don't get me wrong; he's one of the best coaches ever. But he's not going to go out there and catch passes for Justin Herbert. And, I know that it's like it does make a difference when you a good quarterback will still be able to make plays, but you did just get rid of your top 2 receivers and you brought in guys like DJ Chark, you drafted a guy, and you've got Quentin Johnson, who appears to have like rubber on his hands or something like that. It's just one of those things. It's like the throwing game isn't going to be that strong, and that feels like Justin Herbert's strong suit. And I know Jim Harbaugh wants to get back to the running game. Honestly, I think 6 and 11 is an improvement, especially from last season where they did a lot worse than that. And again, they have a tough schedule. I mean, they play the Chiefs twice. They play a lot of other really good teams. And to me, the Chargers are one of the few teams in the offseason, kind of like the Bills, that objectively got worse. They didn't improve. They objectively got worse. People are calling about Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. Like, the Chargers are not in contending phase. They're kind of in rebuilding phase around their young quarterback and Justin Herbert. So we'll see how this season goes. But right now I have 6 and 11, and that feels right to me. Next, number 14, we have the Raiders. Have them going 5 and 12. This is more, again, the Raiders, they have Gardner Minshew and they have Aiden O'Connell. And they've got, top flight receiver in Devontae Adams, and they've got Christian Wilkins, but, the secondary don't really have much going on there. Their offensive line is better than most teams, and they drafted that really good tight end. So I think their offense might be able to put some things on the board, but they both know that Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew aren't their long-term options. So again, this is a rebuilding year for the Raiders. I think the coach that they hired, I can't think of his name, but I think he's going to be a great fit for them, and I hope they keep him. But that's not going to translate to a lot of wins in year 1. So I have them going 5 and 12. Next, we have the Denver Broncos. I have them at 3 and 14. I mean, the Denver Broncos just traded away Jerry Jeudy. And while they still have one of the best cornerbacks in the game, you don't win the NFL games on the strength of your cornerback. So Bo Nix has looked really good in the preseason, but the preseason is not the regular season. So we'll see how he looks when the regular season starts. I'm rooting for the kid. Hopefully he'll do well. But again, in a year of a rookie quarterback with, not a lot of quarterback options, I think the Broncos offensive line is stronger, but it's just their skill positions and their, even their positions on defense just aren't as strong. So I have them going 3 and 14 for the Denver Broncos. Lastly, never thought I would say this, but the 16th seed in the AFC is the New England Patriots. And, it kind of feels good to say this. I feel like most AFC fans, of like people that have teams in the AFC, probably anyone in the NFL will be happy to see the Patriots as like the worst team in the AFC and potentially the league, because they've just dominated for so long. Again, when you look at the Patriots schedule, not only is it a gauntlet to play the Dolphins twice and the Bills twice and the Jets twice, which some of those games I have them taking, but not only is that a gauntlet in and of itself, they just trade away Matthew Judon, who's arguably their best defender, and they've got a rookie quarterback, and he's got some very unproven receivers. So it's going to be a rebuilding year for the Patriots, probably a rebuilding year for Gerard Mayo. So we'll see if they end up, beating this by a little bit. But right now I have them going 3 and 14, and that's mainly based upon their schedule and also the strength of their team, which just, again, seems like it's going to be a rebuilding kind of situation for them. Moving on to the NFC. So for the NFC, we have at number 1 the San Francisco 49ers. are going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. Not really much of a surprise there. I have them going 13-4. Again, the 49ers division, it's not that tough. They've got the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Cardinals twice. I should say it's a better division. I could see the Rams snatching one from the 49ers or something like that. But overall, I think the 49ers, they're still, all their guys just got back. Brandon Ayuk just got re-upped. I think Trent Williams is going to end up coming back. They're going to go 13-4, and they're going to be the team to beat in the NFC. The Eagles are going to go 12-5 as the number 2 seed in the NFC. I think they're going to bounce back from kind of a crappy year last year where they, it's funny because they got to the playoffs, but just them getting manhandled by the Buccaneers in the playoffs translated into a bad season for them, which is a very good standard to have. If your team's bad season is you making the playoffs and getting beat, that's a good standard to have because obviously, especially coming off of a Super Bowl appearance, but obviously the standard is set very high, right? So I have the Eagles going 12-5. I think they re-upped a lot of their guys, and I think they'll be able, especially those rookies in that secondary, they'll be able to bounce back in a way that will show that they belong there at the top of the NFC, at the number 2 seed at least. Number 3, I have the Lions also going 12-5. The Lions were really hot at the beginning of the year. And then kind of down the stretch, Thanksgiving, they almost cooled off a little bit. They lost a couple of games that we weren't expecting them to the Packers and to the Bears. And then the Bears and the Packers only got better this year. So I still have the Lions going 12-5 and being the 3rd seed in the NFC. A lot of people are saying the number 1 seed in the NFC. I don't see that just yet. I think they're going to end up as a 3rd seed, but it doesn't mean that they can't, potentially go all the way to the Super Bowl. I just have them going 12-5 because their divisional games are going to be quite tough. And again, they got that number 1 schedule. They're going to have to play the Eagles and the 49ers. So there's going to be some tough games for them to get through, but I do ultimately think that they go 12-5. That includes a win over the Jaguars, unfortunately. Number 4, we have the Buccaneers. I have them going 10-7. The Buccaneers, they kind of stayed the course, I feel like, in the offseason. Didn't really make any big moves other than bringing back Baker Mayfield and kind of kept everybody that they had. The one thing that's really worrisome is Carlton Davis got traded to the Lions, and they didn't really draft or bring anybody to replace him. So they kind of got a wild card, in their secondary. And I feel like that it's not necessarily going to make them that much worse, but again, it won't necessarily make them better. So while they made the playoffs last year at 9-8, I have a feeling they'll make the playoffs again, but this time at 10-7. So a little bit better, but just not amazing. And so they'll end up being the 4th seed in the NFC. Number 5, the 5th seed, our first wild card. I have the Cowboys actually at 10-7. Now this one kind of surprised me because I was expecting the Cowboys to have a lot better record for them. But the Cowboys have a very, very tough schedule. Again, playing the Eagles twice. They got the Ravens on there. They've got the Texans on there. They've got the Lions on there. They've got the 49ers on there. So they've got some really top flight teams that they're going to have to go against. So I think there's a good chance the Cowboys could beat this prediction of 10-7. I could see them going all the way to 12-5. The way that when I was picking games, I was like, oh, wow, they've got a really tough schedule. Because, I think the Ravens would beat the Cowboys right now. I think the 49ers, a lot of those teams I mentioned, that's kind of your 7 losses right there. So still a chance to make the playoffs. And I think especially since the Cowboys got manhandled by the Packers in the playoffs last season, it's kind of, are the Cowboys really this powerhouse? Because somehow the Packers were able to completely dismantle them. So I have the Cowboys going 10-7. For the Green Bay Packers, same thing. I have them going 10-7 as the 6th seed. I think the Green Bay Packers are probably going to be the most dangerous team in the NFC. And I think they have the best chance of blowing my prediction out of the water and going 12-5 or maybe even 13-4. For a lot of people, the Packers have become a Super Bowl pick just because of the way Jordan Love's play has completely ascended. The only thing I will give you is so the Green Bay Packers, ironically, are the Jacksonville Jaguars story of 2023. They were in 2023 what we were in 2022. Made the playoffs at the very end. First half of the season had some kind of iffy quarterback play because Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing his best. Jordan Love wasn't playing his best. And then second half of the season somehow took off. Trevor Lawrence again took off with a bunch of no-name receivers and was able to make it all the way into the playoffs, had a stunning playoff victory. Jaguars came back from 27-0 to beat the Chargers. Packers completely dismantled the Cowboys and then went on and lost at the next round of the playoffs. So it's a very similar story. And so based upon the way like everyone thought the Jaguars were going to kind of take the next step, and then it didn't really happen with injuries and things like that and facing a tougher schedule, I think that could kind of be the reality you see here with the Packers. Now, because the Packers, the beautiful thing for the Packers is like because they still have that second place schedule, they won't have to face that many tougher teams. So it might be easier for them to even ascend higher and potentially even win the division. But I just think it's funny how many similarities there are between that story of the Jaguars and the Packers. So like the Packers were kind of the Cinderella team of last year after the Jaguars became the Cinderella team. And like the same thing, first half, iffy quarterback play, and then suddenly took off beating teams that you had no business beating, and including one of those was us beating the Cowboys. So all in all, I have the Packers going 10-7 with a very good chance to beat that by the end of the year. Number 7, the last seed in the playoffs, I have the Falcons going 10-7. Kirk Cousins makes a big difference, and again, I really wanted to say 11-6, but just in that NFC, it's a little crowded and it's a little tough for the Falcons. And I think there are some games like the Falcons play the Chiefs. They play they got to go against the Eagles. They got to face the Saints twice a year. So there's a chance that the Falcons could, prove this wrong and go. They feel more like an 11-6 team, honestly, to me. And I think they might end up winning the division over the Buccaneers. There's just a couple of games in there I had them dropping just because of the way everything played out. But like I said, 10-7, maybe 11-6 feels about right for the Falcons. New quarterback. I think if they had, drafted like Dallas Turner instead of Michael Penix Jr., which again, a lot of Falcons fans are saying was a good idea. Hey, I'm not knocking it. But if you had drafted him and then traded for Matthew Judon, I'd be talking about the Falcons like they were going to go 12-5 because that's what every team like dreams to have. Experienced pass rusher on one side, rookie pass rusher with a whole bunch of upside on the other side. That is the dynamic tandem that every team wants to have. And so, had the Falcons done that, I think I probably would have put them higher. But, they took Michael Penix Jr., which no problem, building for the future. So I think Kirk Cousins gets them into the playoffs at either 10-7, could be 11-6. For 8 and 9, for number 8, I have the Los Angeles Rams going 9-8. I'm not sure. Matthew Stafford appears to be kind of hurt. I'm not exactly sure the story on that. So like if he misses time, this could easily drop to 7 wins, 8 or 7 wins, because I don't think their backup quarterback situation is good enough to where they can overcome the loss of Matthew Stafford. Pretty much, I think any game that they have on their calendar, if Matthew Stafford's not playing, could be a loss. Where will be a loss, basically. So his health will definitely be something to monitor. Right now, I have them going 9-8, again, based upon their division and the strength of schedule and who they're going against. Still a winning record, but you just slightly miss out on the playoffs. I think next year they have a much better chance of getting into the playoffs because a lot of those young players that started to come on last year for the Rams are going to be veterans. A lot of their draft picks this year, we're going to start going into that veteran atmosphere and having that experience, which will help make their team a lot better. So like the Rams are one of those teams where in this upcoming offseason, they really don't have to do much other than watch their own guys get better, and that will make them better, which I think is a great position for any team to be in. With the Seahawks, I have them at 9-8. And it's weird to feel because like the Seahawks have consistently made so many moves to get better every single year, but it feels like they just reach kind of like a dome of 9-8 and they just can't really get past it. And I don't know if that's because Geno Smith isn't the guy to get them past that 9-8 record, that like winning record, but not really in the playoffs, or if the rest of the team, because they signed him to like a very, very team friendly deal. $25 million for a starting quarterback is insane. But, I guess we'll see. Like they have a chance to beat this, but they also have a chance to be lower than this. So I have them at 9-8. It's still a winning record. We'll see how far, everything that they did in the offseason really takes them. Because and a lot of their draft picks from a couple of years ago haven't really taken the next step. Like Tariq Woolen played really well 2 years ago, and then last year he was just kind of so-so. So we'll see. Of course, they're going to strive to get better and everything, but right now I have the Seahawks going 9-8, and like I said, I could see that being a little higher or a little lower. Right now I have the Bears, the number 10 seed, going 8-9. Caleb Williams is walking into a fantastic situation. Only problem is his offensive line, but he's got guys to throw to for days. I think after this year, the Bears are probably either going to move on from DJ Moore or Keenan Allen. Just kind of give Rome Doomsday a year to like acclimate into the offense, but he is definitely going to be their number one receiver by probably next year. And I think, yeah, Caleb Williams is walking into a fantastic situation. I think the only knock on the Bears right now is just their offensive line. And I think if I was the Bears, I probably would have looked into drafting a young pass rusher rather than Roman Doomsday just because I have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. But again, the Bears really want to make sure that Caleb Williams is set up for success, and I can't blame them for that. And he is, because the Bears, again, they've got good players at every position. The only question for the Bears is the offensive line. So, if you get pressure on them, you'll probably end up winning. And so that's the thing that the offensive coordinator really has to figure out. But I still have it as a great year. They're going to be sniffing the playoffs the whole season, but ultimately end up 8-9. New Orleans Saints, kind of the same thing, 8-9. I think this might end up being Derek Carr's last year with the Saints. I think he's led them as far as he can take them. And, every year he's not getting better. It's one of those things where like he's kind of reached his peak. And unless they can put better weapons around them, I mean, like I said, Michael Thomas fell off so hard. Now their top receiver is Chris Olave and then Raheed Shaheed. And then there's just some other guys in there. And their offensive line constantly has problems. They still get a strong defense. I'm hoping that, the Jaguars trade for Marshawn Lattimore. We'll give you Cam Robinson for Marshawn Lattimore. Fix your offensive line issues. Really shore up our secondary because you guys got a great secondary. So, just throwing that out there. But overall, I think the Saints end up 8-9, which is good for third in their division, but not enough to get into the playoffs. Number 12, we have the Cardinals at 6-11. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be better and be better for Kyler Murray. I don't know what the Cardinals' record was last year. Again, they didn't really make any moves this offseason to like really improve or do a whole lot of things other than draft. And so I think that's kind of where they're at right now. They got an extra first round pick from the Texans, which was a good move by them. Or no, was that last year? I can't even remember now. But anyway, I think Marvin Harrison, is going to have a great season. I think Kyler Murray is going to, have a average season, average season for him, I guess. And that leaves me with the Cardinals going 6-11. A number 13 seed, I have the Panthers going 6-11, and I feel much more confident about this after watching Bryce Young play a little bit in the preseason. I think he looks a lot more comfortable than we were expecting. His connection with Deontay Johnson is looking good. And again, the Panthers did the right thing by investing in the offensive line. It's still not perfect. He still is getting hit and pressured too much, but it's better than it was last year. And even if he has another extra second to throw to guys who can actually get open, he might make some noise. The only problem is that in order to get their offense to that level, the Panthers had to completely gut their defense, where it's just a shade of its former self. They were the number 3 defense last year, which is something a lot of people forget. And I'm here in Charlotte recording this, hoping to get some exciting Panthers games because I live about like 10 minutes of walking from the stadium. But, we might have to wait a couple of years for that. If the Panthers go 6-11, and again, I don't think the record will determine as much whether they end up sticking with Bryce Young. I think it's just going to depend on him, his performance, and do they see improvement. If they see it, they'll move on. If they have another season that was just as bad as last year, if they see improvement, they'll stick with him. If they don't see it, if it was just as bad as it was last year, they'll probably end up moving on even after just 2 years. So my official prediction for them is 6-11. And if they go 6-11, that should see as a big win and a big improvement for Panthers fans here in Charlotte. Next at number 14 seed, I have the Vikings going 4-13. A lot of this is partially because of Sam Darnold, of J.J. McCarthy going down, but also Jordan Addison is out indefinitely. And so, you can throw to Justin Jefferson, obviously, playmaking wide receiver, and you still got T.J. Hawkinson, but that severely limits the weapons on the Vikings roster. And I think J.J. McCarthy, again, he has that upside to where I probably wouldn't change the record this much. Maybe it would be like 6-11 or something like that. But JJ McCarthy, you could probably see him continually get better, and some of those losses will start turning into wins as he gets used to the NFL. With Sam Darnold, as soon as you put him out there, you know exactly what you're getting. Maybe he'll make a nice story for himself, bounce around the league like Ryan Fitzpatrick. But for right now, I have him going 4-12 in what ends up being a rebuild year, even though they drafted JJ McCarthy. And he's in a good situation. But again, with Addison out for a little bit too, that really hurts because your weapons are severely injured. At 15, I had the Washington Commanders going 3-14. They made some very average signings in the offseason. Like pretty much every signing they made was like average, just to put their quarterback, who I can't think of his name now either, their rookie quarterback into a situation. Oh, Jaden Daniels, just so they could put their rookie quarterback into a situation that's like functional, not necessarily like really good. So I think it'll take some time for this Commanders team, especially after they kind of cratered hard last year. So I think they end up going 3-14. Jaden Daniels going to get his lumps as a rookie. As long as the Commanders keep him from getting injured, I mean, he'll probably learn a lot this year, but I got them going 3-14. New York Giants, unfortunately, also have them going 3-14. Malik Neighbors is nice, really moves the needle, but it's a shame because as soon as the Giants got Darren Waller, he immediately tapered off and is now retired. So it's like that trade was basically for nothing. And it's kind of like the Raiders kind of knew that he had reached his end. So when a rookie wide receiver is literally your only weapon, that is not a great sign for how well a team is going to do in the regular season. And when your quarterback is Daniel Jones, again, that's especially with how he looked in the preseason, it's hard. Now their defense might be pretty good with Brian Burns and everything, but your defense can be amazing, and it doesn't matter if you can't score points, as the Panthers proved last year when they were the number 3 defense in the NFL. So the Giants also lost some big players in their secondary too. So overall, this is probably going to be a rebuild year. I don't know if it'll end up being Brian DeBoles last year, because I feel like it just kind of depends if the management will blame him or blame Daniel Jones or blame both. But again, he kind of made Daniel Jones as good as he's going to get. And that's how do you put that on him? You know what I mean? But either way, I have the Giants going 3-14. So those are my record predictions for the entire NFL for each team. And again, this is based upon using a predictor, looking at their schedules, and actually picking each game rather than just assigning them a record based upon what you see. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Do you think some of the teams are going to be higher, some are going to be lower? And of course, stay tuned for when I do my Jaguars game picks on each team that we are going to win or lose against. So thank you guys so much for joining, and always remember, it was always the Jags.